We get questions about what happens if you don't pay your dues, or what happens if you don't do this or don't do that. What does the board do? We currently, considering we have over about 808 homes, we only have 3 delinquencies in this community, which is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. There's a lot of honest people here, there's no doubt about it. What happens if you don't? You will be charged additional fees. We could file a lien with the lawyer, but the item number 3 is once say an account has been assigned to a lawyer, then we have a hands-off approach from the board. We no longer are involved in it. It is in legal channels, and the lawyers do the collecting. If there are any fees, whatever it happens to be, it's in the lawyer's hands. It is out of the HOA hands at that point. Based on the town hall meeting that we had with the community, there was a lot said about, what about parking, and what about traffic enforcement, and on and on and on. And, he offered me a lozenge, very good. What about parking? We have if you look at the charter right now, it says you don't park on the street, period, and if you do, you can be towed. Well, we'd have tow trucks lined up all over the place, and we're not that heavy-handed. So we figured we need to change the charter, and we have. And what we're saying in there is, yes, you can park on the street, and there'll be a couple conditions. It's fairly simple and straightforward, because even the enforcement of that is a little tricky. There's a couple things we absolutely insist on. You don't park in a cul-de-sac, because that would limit access to emergency vehicles. And just in general, don't park in a place where you would interfere with emergency vehicle traffic. But if you have guests coming over because you have a family event, or you're hosting neighbors or something, and people need to park, so you have your two cars parked in the driveway, and you have half a dozen other cars. Park them on the same side of the street, and be sure that there is accessibility to emergency vehicles, so that an EMT vehicle or a fire truck can gain access to that street. And so you'll see that in writing in the new parking rules, so that we aren't saying you park on the street, you get towed. When was the last time anyone was towed? And if we started doing that, you'd be storming my house. So we want to be reasonable about this, but we ask you to be reasonable also. And when the rules come out and you see them online, just check them out. But as the way I described, just don't inhibit emergency vehicle traffic. It will also contain at least a statement, just as a reminder to everybody. Observe normal driving rules, speed limits, stop signs, yield signs, not just because in Crestwood, because they're private streets, you say, well, we can do whatever we want. Well, to some degree, maybe that's true, but we ask you to abide by what would be the normal driving laws if you're driving in downtown Gainesville or downtown anywhere. Drive according to the existing traffic rules, and you do yourself and your neighbors a favor. Personal property maintenance. This will hit home to everyone, no pun intended. Starting on the 1st of January of 2019, you're going to take, if you're outside of the warranty, which is 1 year on sprinkler systems, maintenance of your plants and shrubs, once you're outside of that 1 year warranty, it's on you. It's no longer an associated responsibility to adjust the sprinkler head. Now, if it gets damaged and you can prove someone else damaged it, then that's a different matter. But just routinely, the routine maintenance on your sprinkler systems rests with you. You're also obligated to keep your yard in good shape. Some people don't want to save water and say, what the heck is Bermuda grass? It dries out, it's brown, but it'll come green again one day when it rains. That's not good enough. You're responsible to maintain your yard in a proper state so that its value, your own value, is maintained and the value of your neighbors. If you don't do that, somebody's going to know about it, and Gary over there will be sending you a letter. So keep that in mind, that's a big issue, particularly with the sprinkler systems, because it wasn't like that in the past. That responsibility will come to you. If you're within that 1-year warranty, as of the 1st of January, then it'll extend. So if you haven't closed, let's say you're closed just in February or March of this year, then it'll be that full 1-year warranty. Some of the homes in the older areas, particularly in phase 1, they start to fade, paint chips, starts to look bad. Paint and trim. Now some of this gets to be subjective, but the best subjective analyst we have is Meg Bone. Going to point to Dan, but he does the engineering side. Some of this you would look at, if it's paint and trim, it's something that it is of interest to the Architectural Review Committee, because if you want to paint, you have to paint using the same colors that we had before. Just because you like red doors doesn't mean you can paint a red door. I can't do that. But if it's the beige colors, the beige tones, the brown tones, start to look at that and keep that up, because after a while, it'll become apparent that it needs work. And one of the rules is you're obligated to keep that up to standard. So that's something that that we'll be looking at, and it certainly would apply to the older homes. Been around here 8-9 years, and it may need work. And we ask that you stick with the ARC process. That is, submit your work order. There are some people in the past who just say, I'll do it, and I'll ask for forgiveness. We're not that forgiving. There have been 2 cases, and in 2 of them they were more egregious, about doing something and having to backtrack. One had to do with somebody had these stone sculptures, they were like gargoyles or whatever they were. They were sitting out in the front on these front posts, and was forced to move them. They actually had to get a crane in here. They were so big, they had them moved. There was one where they dropped them in place. This was some years ago. I didn't see it, but I was told about it at the time. It's just I do it and see what happens. It's bad policy. It's in my mind, it's even disrespectful to your neighbor just to do that, knowing that it doesn't fit in the overall design scheme, which is prevalent throughout Crestwood. So we ask that you comply with your various ARC and landscape requests. With that, the floor is open.
I saw a cable line on the slide. What's that all about?
Yeah.
We're going to do it. Would they tell us about it?
Yeah, I'll ask that.
My name is Kay Scholes. I live with a berm, a community common land berm behind me, and I had a garden put in by Pikes, and they're coming out tomorrow to replace the dead plants. But when they were here, there are holly trees on the berm that are turning yellow. And I asked them what's happening with the holly trees, and they said, well, your landscaping group should be fertilizing them, and they're obviously not. Are we going to do anything about that?
These are
holly trees on common land berm that need to be fed.
Send me an email and I'll get it to these kids.
Okay.
You had a question about the.
I saw the word cable on one of your slides. What's going on with cable?
We are tied into the cable contract through 2020. Once that's done, we got to see if we can get a better deal. It would be like that with any contract that comes up. Can we can we get more out of the contract now, or do we need to modify this contract so that it provides the services we need? Landscaping is one example. We do there's a wide variety of things that are done. Do we need to continue doing them in exactly the same way, or are there cost savings in it? And that's one of the things that the experts hopefully can advise us on, and Meg Bloom being one of them.
No, Ron, you
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey, Ron Stowe. One of your slides up there said the transition committee had been suspended. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Because of the need to react more quickly on the part of the board, it's felt that we should take a direct hands-on approach in looking at the priorities. The information that we received up to this point from the from the transition committee is adequate for us to begin that process. So that was a board decision that we would suspend their activities for right now, as opposed to them continuing to develop a longer list of a punch list, if you will, a checklist of faults and things that need to be done. We have sufficient information to work on now. Our job now is to narrow this down to a list of acceptable high priority items. There'll be some list of priority items, followed by even some things which may be looked at as just cosmetic. We have to know. I have to know when I go in to meet with Bob Rademacher, the developer, that we are focusing on the key things, and it's felt that the board should take a more hands-on approach as opposed to using the committee. They've done great work on this, gave us a lot of information, and from that we can pull some priority items. But for now, that's the road we've chosen to take.
Here, Ron. I'll come to you, just hold your hand up.
I'm Susan Leahy. I have two questions. One is, who is our legal counsel?
Noah and Howard
Okay, thank you.
is a legal firm.
Second one is, it mentioned on one of the slides something about environmental issues, and I'm curious to know what those are. What
were you doing? Were you looking at me?
No, I wasn't even answering. I'll do it. One of the things we'll have to look at are there any environmental issues that we need to focus on as part of the overall transfer or the transition. It is just one aspect of the many things that we'll be looking at. So if there are environmental issues, what are they? And we will uncover that over the next several months prior to that transfer.
Can you give us an example of like an environmental issue?
It would have to do with the drainage, for example, might be an environmental issue. Some of the properties which are in what is called upland core, where there are drainage areas that drain into the lake, these could involve environmental issues. Some of the property that we have, is it suitable for development, and there are environmental issues associated with that. There could be some things which are core related, which could impact on us. We haven't identified any specifically for that, but we want to make sure that that's addressed so that we aren't blindsided by that.
Ron.
I'm Carol Hamlin. The question I have kind of goes back to the landscape issue that you raised earlier about possible changes in a contract. My question to the board and to you is, what kind of a process are you planning to use to solicit input from the residents here on what sort of changes or things should be included in that contract and the cable and many of the other things that will change as time goes along? Thanks.
We will rely on the various subgroups, the landscape committee, because there is some expertise in there. What do they think ought to be done? We rely on them to, if they wish to coordinate with other members of the community, with other committees. We give them a free hand just to come up with ideas, a concept of what we should be doing that may be different than what we're doing now. How do we get more for our dollar?
Landy Johnson, Crestline Parkway. The announcement that Coulter is speeding things up has me a
Yeah.
little bit concerned about the engineering group. Will they have time to gather all this data that they're doing right now and for it to be analyzed before we actually have to talk with Coulter?
The answer to that is, yes, we should have time to do that. Dan's group is, well, there are two things going on. First of all, we have a contract out with a company to do a property assessment. I think that is the formal term for that, which analyzes the walls, the streets, the various buildings that for which we're responsible. They get all of this detail, and then we find out from that analysis, is there anything in there that's really significant that should be on our high priority list, something that we should take to the developer. So that's what is there time to do that? unless the developer accelerates this thing significantly, yes, there should be time to do that. But Dan has a full plate. He's got a lot of things to look at, and but the engineer side of things is a key element, because there could be big dollar items associated with that if we find something. If not, we're in pretty decent shape. But if we find something, that may be the basis, and have to negotiate with the developer.
I can help answer that as well. We've got a number of teams walking the community right now, and some of you may have seen them. We're looking at curbs and streets, taking pictures. Many of you have been kind enough to send some emails to me to identify some areas that we should look at, and we're doing that. You know, Ron's absolutely right. We have a contract out with an outfit called Ray Engineering, who's been in the community assessment business for about 35 years in the area. They get really high marks, and hopefully they'll be starting rather soon to come back in the community and look through this. So I believe we're going to have more than enough time to get the report in and give Ron and the board the right negotiating tool.
Our charge from the board is to make sure that of all the things that we get, all the information that we gather that comes in front of us, what are really the most important things that we need to focus on? And that's our job is to sort that out. That's what we have to do, and that's our deliverable to you as a community, making sure that we identify the key things so that when we make that final transfer of control and ultimately that final transition, that we are on the best financial footing possible, and that's what we're charged to do. So we're doing our best to protect the community funds and the community assets.
I'm Stan Kopkin, and I live on Crestwind Parkway, sometimes called the Autobahn of Germany. I've stopped 3 people today, and I can't determine how fast they're going, but it's certainly more than 25, and it's probably more than 45, and it could even be much higher than that. Some of the response I get is ugly. You know, like, I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, it is wrong, and I want the board to look into the possibility of some sort of small speed breakers or some kind. If you live on Crestwind Parkway, and I know pretty much everybody that does, it is a significant problem. Fortunately, there's no little children, but we do have older men and women who try to walk across the streets with their animals, and it is not pleasant. Trust me, it is not pleasant. I'm tempted to buy a radar gun myself and just police it myself if I have to. The other thing is, just for information, when you bought your home, it said that the developer is not responsible for radon if it's in your basement. There are multiple people that I know who are having a radon problem in their basements. I would suggest you have it tested and checked. If it's over a certain point, you should do something about it. It can be environmentally hazardous to your health.
The issue of speeding and not yielding, you remember that from the town hall meeting. When you asked the question, there was this deafening silence. What do you do about it? Well, the area is a committee looking at what are the options that we have? What can we do? And I know speed bumps have been brought up before, and that's when all the vegetables start flying. Yes, it's doable, but is that the way we want to go? we keep appealing to the community, drive defensively. You figure as we get older,